Oliver and Miss Kinte. "It's not fair," grumbled Mike in the shed the next morning. "Rex kills a man and he gets new paint. And after everything he said to me too." "Be quiet," snapped Sigrid, looking worriedly over at Rex. He was still upset following last night. "You don't know how it feels to kill someone. Poor Rex had a bad experience. You wouldn't like it if you were responsible for anyone's death, now would you?" "Exactly," agreed Bert. "The way you're treating him, I'm thankful I get passengers who are more kinder than engines such as you." Mike whooshed angrily and snorted away to the quarries, just as Duck arrived with some trucks ready for Frank to load. After Rex's accident, the small controller had given him a few days to recover, and Bert, who had been almost completely mended, was still waiting for his final piece, the regulator, to be put back. He had only been moved out of the workshops so as to make way for Rex so the latter could be inspected. "Whatever's the matter with Mike?" he asked. Sigrid sadly explained everything to him. Duck's face fell. "I understand," he said. Then he looked at Rex. "You did all you could, Rex. By no means is it your fault." He puffed away, deep in thought. Meanwhile, Oliver puffed into Tidmouth Station, where Thomas was waiting with Annie and Clarabelle, while Gordon was just about to leave with the express to Vickerstown. Oliver was taking passengers aboard Isabel and Dulcie from there to the Little Western. "Why the long face, Oliver?" Thomas asked. Oliver told them about what Duck had told him about Rex, and how rude Mike had been. "Oh dear," sighed Thomas. "Well, awful," twittered Annie and Clarabelle in agreement. "Huh," said Gordon. "Shocked because a plate layer was being careless. That's no reason for a big engine like me to be concerned about you little engines." Oliver was shocked. "Just because something like that never happened to you, it doesn't mean you should treat others that way," he exclaimed. "I know," agreed Thomas. "You've obviously forgotten what happened on the Vickerstown Bridge." Gordon wisely fell silent at this. "Well, one thing's for sure, at least the passengers don't behave like that," Oliver replied. Thomas looked at him warily, while Gordon quietly seethed. That's where you're wrong, Oliver. Sometimes passengers can be just as bad," Thomas argued. "Why? How do you know?" "Well, don't think I've been running my branch line for so long without witnessing a few problems with passengers myself," Thomas told him. "Earlier today at Arlesburgh, one of Gordon's passengers talked so loudly on the phone just outside the station and used such awful language that another passenger with a young child thought it was someone else who was talking. They only realized it was the person on the phone when that someone told them so." "Pah!" snorted Gordon, and he puffed away, feeling slightly embarrassed. "One thing's for sure, I doubt if I'd ever get that sort of passenger," huffed Oliver importantly. Despite his accident with the turntable, he could still occasionally be boastful and cocky. "Well, don't say I didn't warn you," cautioned Thomas, as his guard's whistle blew and he puffed away. "Huh!" scoffed Oliver. He saw and blew a friendly peep to Miss Kinte, a dark-skinned woman who climbed aboard Isabel. He didn't notice a rather irate-looking passenger had also aboarded Isabel and was shooting dirty looks at Miss Kinte. Miss Kinte was a friendly and polite woman. She was from Africa, but she spoke perfect English and Sudrian. She worked as a schoolteacher at a school in Arlesburgh. Everyone who knew her knew that a kinder, more helpful lady was hard to come by. Certainly the engines felt sure that no one could be unkind to her in return. So what happened next came as a great shock to all. Oliver's journey was more or less uneventful. The signals shone green and he had a clear run along the line. But just as he neared Arlesburgh, he heard shouting coming from Isabel. "I do not want you teaching my children or my grandchildren, and I mean that, my girl, I mean that!" Oliver was confused until he looked back and saw that one of Isabel's windows was open. However, it was a windy day, so he decided to ignore it. "It's probably just someone's conversation mixed up with the wind," he thought. What he heard next made him realize just how wrong he had been from the start. "I'm a Sudrian lady, and there's no ruddy way I want ruddy foreign teachers to look after my children." "Whatever's the matter?" he asked the coaches. "It's this passenger," answered Isabel. "She keeps insulting Miss Kinte just because she's a different skin colour," replied Dulcie. This made Oliver gasp in astonishment. He knew now how right Thomas had been. But this time, the passenger in question had gone too far. He knew that, just like engines, people deserved to be treated as equals. To hear that a passenger had been so horrible, so cruel to another passenger was, in his opinion, beyond belief. To Miss Kinte of all people, Miss Kinte, and on his train too. "Driver," he said, "we need to tell the guard everything at the next station," and he explained what happened. "Will do, old boy," the driver replied grimly. "I won't have any racism on our train." They stopped at Halltrough, and the fireman ran back to the guard, who had his eye on his watch to keep track of the time. The fireman told him everything, and he spoke to the station master. Meanwhile, the driver had informed the porter, and he climbed aboard Isabel to speak to the offending passenger. "Is everything all right, miss?" asked the porter. "Yes, everything is quite all right," replied the offending passenger irritably. "I trust everything is equally so with you?" "Yes, thank you, but I'm just worried that you might be upsetting somebody," the porter answered. "I wouldn't care in the least," replied the offending passenger rudely. The porter tried to protest, but the offending passenger constantly cut him off, and it seemed like there would be an argument when the guard boarded Isabel and recognized the offending passenger. "Excuse me, miss, but do you have a ticket?" he asked. "No," responded the offending passenger. "Well, I'm very sorry, but you must get off here, then," the guard replied. "I'm afraid you're upsetting the passengers." The offending passenger protested, but it was no good. She was escorted out of the platform and into the station master's office by the station master and the porter. The other passengers climbed aboard, some grumbling about the delay, others grumbling about how rude the offending passenger had been. The signal showed clear. The guard blew his whistle and waved his green flag. Oliver, eager to make up for lost time, but also upset by all that had occurred, puffed quickly away. "I'm sorry about that passenger, Miss Kinte," Oliver sighed when they reached the end of the line. "It's not your fault, Oliver. The problem is that there are some people who don't accept the fact that others are different," Miss Kinte replied sadly. "But why?" Oliver asked. Miss Kinte sighed. "All sorts of reasons. Partly because some people think they are superior to others. Partly because some people just don't like anyone who's different, no matter what they say." Oliver glanced down at his buffer beams. He watched Miss Kinte as she left the station, tears in her eyes, pausing only to admire some flowers hanging from a basket. He wished others wouldn't make her feel so depressed. She didn't deserve the treatment the offending passenger had given her. Then an idea flew into his funnel. He remembered Miss Kinte was fond of flowers. She had won the prize for best flower garden in the local gardening competition. He whispered to his crew, who agreed. "They'll be ready tomorrow morning," agreed his driver, who happened to live next door to her. The next morning Miss Kinte opened the door when the driver knocked to find him standing there holding a beautiful bouquet of roses. "My favourites!" he exclaimed. "How sweet of you! Thank you so much!" "It was Oliver's idea," the driver explained. "We thought you deserved it after what that horrible woman said to you." That afternoon, after school ended, Miss Kinte arrived at the station and went onto the platform where Oliver was waiting for his road. "I can't thank you enough," Miss Kinte said gratefully. "It means so much to me, all of you, doing what you did, especially after what that lady said." And she kissed both Oliver and the driver, who blushed a brighter shade of red than Oliver did. His signal clear, Oliver puffed away deep in thought. So Thomas was right. Passengers can sometimes cause trouble. Then again, there are those who are thoughtful and considerate, he sighed. What if only we could live in a world where no one is made to feel awful, no matter how different they are. It's wrong to treat others badly just because they aren't the same as us.